Welcome to the True Crimes Unfold compilation video series. Please note that events and scenarios in this video may be graphic for some viewers. Discretion is advised. Details of the videos are taken from actual case files. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're listening from and what type of cases you'd like us to cover next, and we'll make sure to add them to our list. Don't forget to subscribe to get new stories as soon as they're released. Upon. Now settle in, get ready, and let's begin. Nonthaburi, a peaceful suburb of Bangkok, is often described as a place where tradition and modernity coexist seamlessly. Known for its vibrant floating markets and serene riverside temples, it's a destination that promises calm and safety to its residents. But in November 2023, this picturesque town became the backdrop for a crime so heinous that it shocked the entire nation. The tragic murder of Chonlada Muthuwang, lovingly known as Noon, unraveled a dark story of domestic violence, betrayal, and unchecked rage. Noon's life was stolen in the most brutal way, exposing not just the monster behind the crime, but also the silent struggles faced by victims of abuse. The idyllic streets of Nonthaburi would never feel the same again. It began as an ordinary evening for the local police. A distress call led officers to a vacant lot on the outskirts of Nonthaburi. A passerby had stumbled upon a body wrapped in a blanket, hidden under debris. The lifeless form bore clear signs of a violent end. Bruises, cuts, and the unmistakable markings of a struggle for survival. The victim's identity was confirmed hours later as 29-year-old Chonlada Muthuwang. The news devastated her family and friends, who described her as a loving daughter, a loyal friend, and a determined young woman. But as the investigation unfolded, the truth of what had happened to Noon revealed a nightmare far worse than anyone could have imagined. Noon was a woman of quiet strength and resilience. Born and raised in a modest family, she had always been known for her warm smile and unwavering determination. Friends recalled her as someone who could brighten a room with her presence, someone who faced life's challenges with grace and courage. She met Sirichai Rakthong, known as Game, when she was 25. Their relationship seemed like a fairy tale at first. Game, charming and ambitious, swept her off her feet. He promised her a future filled with love and stability, and Noon believed she had found her partner for life. But as the years passed, the cracks in their relationship began to show. Friends and family noticed subtle changes in Noon. She became quieter, more reserved, and less likely to share details about her personal life. Behind closed doors, Game's temper and controlling behavior began to escalate. Noon, like many victims of domestic violence, struggled to reconcile the man she had fallen in love with and the man he had become. Noon's friends later revealed that she had confided in them about Game's violent tendencies. He would often lash out during arguments, blaming her for his frustrations and insecurities. She had considered leaving him several times but hesitated, torn between hope for change and fear of the unknown. Leaving isn't as simple as people think, one of her friends shared. She was scared of him, of being alone, of not knowing where to go. And he always found a way to convince her to stay, promising that he'd do better. Noon's situation was tragically common. Studies show that victims of domestic violence often face numerous barriers to leaving abusive relationships, including financial dependency, emotional manipulation, and fear for their safety. Noon was no exception. On the day of her murder, Noon had decided to confront Game about their relationship. She had recently started making plans to leave, seeking advice from close friends and researching shelters for women in crisis. But before she could take those steps, Game discovered her intentions. What happened next was captured on CCTV, a chilling account of Noon's final moments. In the footage, she's seen entering their home, visibly tense. Game follows shortly after, his movements sharp and aggressive. Hours later, Game is seen leaving alone, carrying a large rolled-up blanket. The same blanket police would later find concealing Noon's body. For the residents of Nontaburi, the tragedy of Noon's death served as a wake-up call. How could such a brutal act happen in their seemingly safe and peaceful community? And how many other victims of domestic violence were suffering in silence, hidden behind closed doors? The police quickly shifted their focus to finding Game, who had disappeared shortly after the discovery of Noon's body. The urgency of their investigation underscored the gravity of the case, as well as the need for greater awareness and intervention in domestic violence situations. As news of Noon's murder spread, it sparked outrage and grief across Nonthaburi and beyond. Her friends and family held a vigil in her honor, sharing stories of her kindness, her dreams, and the vibrant life she had worked so hard to build. For many, her death highlighted the critical need for systemic change. No one should have to suffer like this, a local activist said at the vigil. Noon's story is heartbreaking, but it's not unique. We need to do better. For her, for every victim of domestic violence. The seeds of change were planted that night as the community vowed to honor Noon's memory by fighting for a future where no one else would face the same fate. To understand the tragedy of Chonlada Muthuwong's death, it's essential to first understand her life. A life marked by resilience, ambition, and a desire for love and stability. Noon, as her friends affectionately called her, was a woman of quiet determination. But the relationship she hoped would bring her happiness instead became a source of pain, culminating in a betrayal that would cost her everything. Noon grew up in a modest household in Nonthaburi, a town she loved for its charm and simplicity. From a young age, she was known for her kindness and work ethic. While her family didn't have much, they instilled in her the values of perseverance and compassion. Noon's mother often recounted how, even as a child, she would go out of her way to help others, whether it was assisting her classmates with schoolwork or caring for stray animals in the neighborhood. As she grew older, Noon carried those values into her professional life. She worked tirelessly as a sales representative for a local cosmetics company, earning the respect of her colleagues and clients. Her dream was to one day start her own business, a dream she spoke of often with her closest friends. But alongside her professional aspirations, Noon also longed for companionship. Her friends described her as romantic at heart, someone who believed in the idea of a soulmate. When she met Sirichai Raktong, known as Game, she thought she had found that connection. Game was everything Noon thought she wanted in a partner: charming, confident, and ambitious. He worked as a freelance graphic designer, and his creativity and outgoing personality immediately drew her in. Their relationship blossomed quickly, with Game making grand promises of a future filled with love and stability. He swept her off her feet, one of Noon's friends recalled. She was so happy at the beginning. Game introduced Noon to his friends and family, and the two became inseparable. To outsiders, they seemed like the perfect couple. They often shared photos of their travels and cozy dinners, their smiles masking the storm brewing beneath the surface. While their relationship started off strong, the cracks began to show within the first year. Game's confidence started to reveal itself as control. He would question Noon's every move, where she went, who she saw, and how she spent her money. What began as seemingly innocent concern escalated into possessive behavior. Game's temper also became more apparent, often flaring up during minor disagreements. Noon, ever the optimist, believed that things would get better. She confided in a close friend, admitting that Game's behavior worried her, but insisting that he was just stressed and that his outbursts weren't who he really was. Like many victims of domestic violence, Noon struggled to reconcile the man she fell in love with and the man he had become. Over time, Game's behavior turned violent. He would lash out verbally, calling Noon names and blaming her for his frustrations. On several occasions, arguments escalated to physical abuse. Noon hid the bruises from her friends and family, afraid of what they might say or do. When she did confide in a few close friends, they urged her to leave. But for Noon, it wasn't that simple. He always apologized afterward, one friend recalled. He'd cry and promise to change, and she wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe the man she fell in love with was still in there somewhere. Noon also faced the financial and emotional hurdles that often trap victims in abusive relationships. She and Game shared expenses, and she worried about what leaving would mean for her stability. More than that, she feared what he might do if she tried to leave. The cycle of abuse tightened its grip, leaving Noon feeling trapped. In the months leading up to her death, Noon began taking small but significant steps to reclaim her independence. She started saving money in a secret account, confiding in her closest friend about her plans to leave. She also researched shelters and legal resources for women in crisis, trying to prepare herself for the inevitable confrontation with Game. She was scared, but she was determined, her friend said. She wanted to get out. She wanted a better life for herself. However, leaving an abusive relationship is often the most dangerous time for victims. Abusers, feeling their control slipping away, can become more volatile and desperate. Noon was acutely aware of this risk, and she tried to keep her plans as discreet as possible. But somehow, Game found out. On the day of her murder, Noon returned home from work, visibly tense. CCTV footage shows her entering their shared apartment while texting on her phone, likely updating her friend about her plans. Game followed shortly after, his demeanor noticeably agitated. Witnesses later reported hearing raised voices and sounds of a struggle coming from their unit. What happened next remains partially a mystery, but the aftermath was chillingly clear. CCTV footage captured Game leaving the apartment hours later, carrying a large rolled-up blanket. Inside that blanket was Noon's lifeless body. Forensic evidence would later reveal the extent of Game's violence. Noon had suffered multiple injuries, indicating a prolonged and brutal attack. Her final moments were a testament to her strength and resilience as she fought valiantly for her life. For those who knew Noon and Game, the revelation of what had happened behind closed doors was both shocking and heartbreaking. How could a man who once seemed so devoted turn into a monster? And how had Noon, a woman of such strength and determination, become ensnared in such a toxic relationship? Experts on domestic violence explain that these relationships are often marked by stark contrasts. The highs of affection and promises, followed by the lows of control and violence. The cycle can leave victims feeling confused, isolated, and unable to break free. Noon's story, while tragic, is not uncommon. It reflects the struggles faced by countless victims around the world. Noon's death sent shockwaves through her community. For her friends and family, it was a devastating reminder of the dangers of unchecked abuse. She deserved so much better, her mother said in a tearful statement. She was kind, hardworking, and full of life, and he took all of that away. As the investigation continued, Noon's story became a rallying cry for change. Advocacy groups began organizing workshops and campaigns to raise awareness about domestic violence, ensuring that her loss would not be in vain. Noon's life, though tragically cut short, remains a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Her story highlights the importance of recognizing the signs of abuse, supporting victims, and fostering a society where no one has to endure the pain she faced. The murder of Chonlada Noon Muthuwong marked the horrifying culmination of a cycle of abuse and control that had plagued her relationship with Sirichai Game Rakthong. But as details of the crime came to light, it was the meticulous investigation that pieced together the events of that fateful day, unraveling the sinister truth behind Noon's death. Noon's body was discovered in a vacant lot on the outskirts of Nonthaburi, wrapped in a blanket and hidden under debris. The grisly discovery, made by a passerby, immediately raised alarms. Police arriving at the scene noted the clear signs of violence: bruises, lacerations, and defensive wounds indicating that Noon had fought desperately for her life. Forensic evidence suggested that she had been killed elsewhere and her body transported to the lot. The presence of fibers and soil, not native to the dump site, supported this theory, shifting the investigation's focus to her home. Back at the apartment Noon shared with Game, investigators found chilling evidence of the crime. The living room bore signs of a violent struggle: overturned furniture, blood spatter, and signs of an attempt to clean up the scene. A roll of tape matching the one used on the blanket containing Noon's body was discovered in a drawer, further implicating the residence as the primary crime scene. Nonthaburi's surveillance infrastructure played a pivotal role in unraveling the case. CCTV cameras around the apartment complex captured key moments leading up to and after Noon's murder. The footage showed Noon entering the building on the evening of her death, her demeanor visibly tense. Moments later, Game was seen following her, his face set in a grim expression. Hours later, Game was recorded leaving the building alone, carrying a large, rolled-up blanket. The image, eerily clear, became a cornerstone of the investigation. Additional footage from nearby streets showed him driving a borrowed vehicle toward the lot where Noon's body was later found. The CCTV footage not only confirmed Game's involvement, but also provided a timeline that allowed investigators to piece together the sequence of events. By the time Noon's body was discovered, Game had disappeared. The urgency to locate him escalated as police issued an arrest warrant and began tracking his movements. Investigators traced his phone activity and bank transactions, revealing that he had withdrawn a significant amount of cash before going off the grid. Witnesses reported seeing Game boarding a bus bound for a remote province, where he was believed to be seeking refuge with relatives. Police followed this lead, launching a nationwide manhunt and distributing his photo to the public. The media coverage of the case ensured that his face became widely recognized, making it increasingly difficult for him to remain in hiding. As investigators delved into Game's background, a clearer picture of his motives began to emerge. Financial records revealed mounting debts from failed business ventures and a gambling addiction that had spiraled out of control. Game's financial instability had been a point of contention in his relationship with Noon, who had shouldered much of their household expenses in recent months. Interviews with Noon's friends further illuminated the toxic dynamic between the couple. Game's jealousy and controlling behavior had escalated in the weeks leading up to the murder, as Noon began making plans to leave him. Friends reported that she had expressed fears about how he might react if he discovered her intentions. The financial strain, coupled with Game's fear of losing control over Noon, painted a chilling picture of a man driven by desperation and rage. Game was eventually apprehended in a rural village after a tip-off from a local resident. He surrendered without resistance, his demeanor subdued but cooperative. In police custody, Game initially denied any involvement in Noon's death, claiming that they had argued but she had left the apartment alive. However, confronted with the overwhelming evidence, including the CCTV footage, forensic findings, and the items recovered from the apartment, Game's story began to unravel. Under intense questioning, he broke down and confessed to the murder. According to his account, the argument that night had escalated when Noon confronted him about his behavior and expressed her intent to leave. Fueled by a toxic mix of anger, fear, and humiliation, Game attacked her. He described the violence in chilling detail, admitting that he had lost control in the heat of the moment. After realizing what he had done, Game said he panicked and attempted to cover up the crime. He wrapped Noon's body in a blanket, cleaned up the apartment as best as he could, and transported her to the vacant lot under the cover of night. His actions, he claimed, were driven by fear of being caught, though his confession did little to garner sympathy. The forensic evidence further corroborated Game's confession. Bloodstains in the apartment matched Noon's DNA, and the tape used on the blanket was identical to a roll found in their home. The autopsy revealed multiple injuries, including blunt force trauma and stab wounds, indicating a prolonged and violent struggle. Investigators also discovered text messages on Noon's phone that she had sent to a friend just hours before her death. In them, she expressed fear about confronting Game and her determination to leave the relationship. These messages became a poignant reminder of Noon's courage and the tragic consequences of her attempts to reclaim her life. Noon's murder was not an isolated incident. It highlighted the pervasive issue of domestic violence in society and the barriers victims face in seeking help. Advocacy groups quickly mobilized, using her story to raise awareness and demand systemic change. One advocate emphasized the importance of community intervention, saying, Noon's death is a stark reminder that domestic violence thrives in silence. We need to create environments where victims feel safe to speak out and where abusers are held accountable before it's too late. The case also prompted calls for better resources for domestic violence victims, including access to emergency shelters, legal support, and counseling services. Noon's story became a rallying cry for change, inspiring efforts to ensure that her death would not be in vain. As the investigation concluded and the case moved toward trial, Noon's friends, family, and community continued to grapple with the loss. Vigils were held in her honor, with attendees sharing memories of her kindness, strength, and determination. Her life, though tragically cut short, became a symbol of resilience and a catalyst for action. For Nontaburi, the tragedy of Noon's death shattered the illusion of safety in their peaceful town. But it also brought people together, uniting them in their grief and their resolve to address the issues that had allowed such a tragedy to occur. The investigation had brought justice closer for Noon, but the lessons her story offered were far from over. Her death was a stark reminder of the urgent need to confront domestic violence and to protect those who are most vulnerable. As the community awaited the trial, they vowed to honor Noon's memory by ensuring that her story would inspire change. The apprehension of Sirichai Game, Rakthong, was just the beginning of the legal journey to seek justice for Chonlada Noon Muthuwong. What followed was a harrowing confession that detailed the horrifying last moments of Noon's life, coupled with a trial that gripped the nation. The proceedings offered a grim reminder of the consequences of unchecked rage and domestic violence, as well as the importance of accountability. In police custody, Game initially tried to maintain his innocence, insisting that Noon had left their apartment alive after an argument. However, the mountain of evidence against him left little room for denial. Confronted with the damning CCTV footage, forensic findings, and witness testimonies, Game finally broke down and confessed to the crime. His confession painted a grim picture of the events leading up to Noon's death. According to Game, the argument began when Noon confronted him about his controlling behavior and financial irresponsibility. She told him she planned to leave, a declaration that sent him into a fit of rage. I couldn't control myself, Game admitted during questioning. She said she didn't love me anymore, that she was done with me. The argument escalated quickly. Game admitted to attacking Noon in the heat of the moment, striking her multiple times before grabbing a kitchen knife. The forensic evidence confirmed that Noon had suffered a combination of blunt force trauma and stab wounds, consistent with his account. Her injuries indicated a prolonged struggle, highlighting her bravery in the face of overwhelming violence. After the attack, Game panicked. He spent hours cleaning the apartment, wrapping Noon's body in a blanket, and disposing of her remains in a vacant lot. The premeditated nature of these actions, using a borrowed vehicle, selecting a remote location, and attempting to sanitize the scene, contradicted his claims of acting impulsively. Game's confession, coupled with the shocking details of the crime, sparked nationwide outrage. Media outlets provided extensive coverage, with headlines condemning Game's actions and calling for justice for Noon. Advocacy groups seized the moment to highlight the dangers of domestic violence, emphasizing the need for systemic reforms to protect victims and hold perpetrators accountable. Public opinion was overwhelmingly against Game. While his confession brought clarity to the case, it did little to garner sympathy. Many viewed his actions as calculated and irredeemable, particularly given the cruelty of Noon's death and his attempts to cover up the crime. Game's trial began months after his arrest, drawing intense public and media attention. He faced charges of premeditated murder, tampering with evidence, and obstruction of justice. The prosecution sought the maximum penalty, arguing that his actions were deliberate and rooted in a pattern of control and abuse. The courtroom was filled with emotion as Noon's family and friends attended each session, determined to see justice served. Photographs of Noon, smiling and full of life, adorned the courtroom, a stark contrast to the brutality of her final moments. Her mother, speaking outside the courthouse, described the pain of losing her daughter. "She was everything to us," she said tearfully. "We just want her to be remembered for the beautiful person she was, not for what he did to her." The prosecution built a meticulous case against Game, presenting a timeline of events that left little room for doubt. Their evidence included CCTV footage. The recordings showing Game leaving the apartment with the rolled-up blanket were central to the prosecution's case. The footage provided a clear visual link between Game and the disposal of Noon's body. Forensic evidence, bloodstains in the apartment, matching tape from the blanket, and the injuries documented in Noon's autopsy all corroborated the prosecution's narrative. Game's confession. Although the defense tried to argue that the confession was coerced, it aligned with the physical evidence and witness accounts, making it a powerful piece of the prosecution's argument. Witness testimonies. Friends and neighbors testified about the toxic nature of Game and Noon's relationship, describing his controlling behavior and the fear Noon had expressed in the weeks leading up to her death. The prosecution emphasized the premeditated nature of Game's actions. They argued that his attempts to clean the crime scene and dispose of Noon's body showed a calculated effort to evade responsibility, not the impulsive actions of a man consumed by temporary rage. Game's defense team faced an uphill battle. Their strategy focused on portraying him as a man driven to desperation by financial stress and emotional instability. They argued that the murder was not premeditated, but rather the result of a heated argument that spiraled out of control. Game's lawyers also tried to shift some of the blame onto external factors, including his struggles with gambling addiction and the pressure of financial debt. They presented character witnesses who described Game as a generally good-natured individual who had made poor choices but wasn't inherently violent. Game himself took the stand, expressing remorse for his actions. "I didn't mean to hurt her," he said, his voice shaking. "I loved her, and I don't know what came over me. I just couldn't handle losing her." However, his testimony did little to sway the jury. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and his attempts to frame the murder as an impulsive act failed to account for the deliberate steps he had taken after Noon's death. After weeks of testimony, the jury reached a unanimous verdict. Guilty on all counts. Game was convicted of premeditated murder, tampering with evidence, and obstruction of justice. The judge, in delivering the sentence, condemned Game's actions as a heinous betrayal of trust and humanity. Game was sentenced to life imprisonment, a decision that brought some measure of closure to Noon's family and friends. While they acknowledged that no sentence could bring her back, they expressed relief that her killer would be held accountable. "This is justice for Noon," her mother said outside the courthouse. "But it doesn't erase the pain. We'll carry this loss forever." The trial's conclusion marked a turning point in the conversation around domestic violence in Thailand. Advocacy groups used the case as a platform to push for greater awareness and stronger protections for victims. Public officials pledged to allocate more resources to shelters, legal aid, and education programs aimed at preventing abuse. Noon's story also inspired grassroots movements focused on empowering women and creating safe spaces for victims to seek help. Her friends launched a campaign in her memory, using her name to promote awareness about the warning signs of abuse and the resources available to those in need. For Nonthaburi, the trial was both a reckoning and a call to action. Residents who had once viewed their town as a haven of safety were forced to confront the hidden dangers of domestic violence and the importance of community vigilance. Local leaders organized town hall meetings to discuss the lessons learned from Noon's case and how to prevent similar tragedies in the future. These gatherings became a space for healing, reflection, and the collective determination to honor Noon's memory by fostering a safer, more supportive community. While the trial brought justice for Noon, her story resonated far beyond the courtroom. She became a symbol of resilience and a reminder of the urgent need to address domestic violence at every level of society. Her family and friends, though devastated by her loss, channeled their grief into action, ensuring that her life would be remembered for its beauty and impact, not just its tragic end. Noon's legacy lives on as a beacon of hope for victims of abuse and a testament to the strength of a community united in the pursuit of justice and change. The conclusion of Sirichai Game, Rakthong's trial, brought a sense of justice for Chonlada, Noon Muthuwong's family and friends, but it also left behind critical questions about the societal and systemic failures that allowed her tragic death to occur. Beyond the courtroom, her case became a rallying point for discussions about domestic violence, safety, and the cultural norms that often keep victims silent. Noon's murder was a stark reminder of the pervasive issue of domestic violence in Thailand and around the world. Advocacy groups used the widespread media attention on the case to highlight alarming statistics. According to reports, nearly 1 in 3 women globally experience some form of domestic violence during their lifetime. Yet many cases go unreported due to fear, stigma, or lack of resources. Noon's friends revealed that she had spoken about Game's controlling behavior and occasional violence, but had hesitated to leave him permanently. This hesitation, they explained, stemmed from fear. Fear of retribution, fear of judgment, and fear of the unknown. She thought she could fix things. One friend shared, she didn't want to give up on him, even though it was costing her everything. Noon's story resonated with many women who recognized the same patterns in their own relationships. Her death became a tragic but powerful catalyst for encouraging victims to seek help and for communities to address the root causes of abuse. The case also shed light on the systemic barriers that keep victims trapped in abusive relationships. For Noon, these barriers included financial dependence. Although Noon worked and had a steady income, her financial entanglement with game made it difficult for her to leave without facing economic instability. Cultural expectations. In many communities, societal norms pressure women to prioritize family harmony and avoid bringing shame to their relationships, even at the expense of their well-being. Lack of accessible resources. Noon had begun researching shelters and legal options in the months leading up to her death. But the limited availability of these resources made her escape plans challenging. These barriers are not unique to Noon's case. Advocates argue that addressing these systemic issues is essential to preventing similar tragedies. We need to create environments where victims feel supported, not judged, said a representative from a local women's rights organization. No one should feel like they have to stay in a dangerous situation because they have no other options. In the wake of Noon's murder, her community rallied to honor her memory and ensure that her death would not be in vain. Advocacy groups, local leaders, and residents came together to address domestic violence through education, policy changes, and support programs. Key initiatives included workshops and seminars. Local organizations began hosting events to educate the public about recognizing the signs of abuse, understanding the cycle of violence, and accessing resources. Improved reporting mechanisms. Police and social services implemented streamlined procedures for reporting domestic violence, ensuring that victims could receive help quickly and discreetly. Expanded shelter programs. Donations poured in to fund safe houses and emergency shelters, providing victims with temporary housing, counseling, and legal assistance. Noon's friends also launched a campaign called Noon's Light, aimed at raising awareness about domestic violence and providing resources for victims. The campaign's social media presence garnered widespread support, with thousands sharing messages of solidarity and pledging to stand against abuse. Noon's case highlighted both the strengths and shortcomings of law enforcement's role in addressing domestic violence. While police worked tirelessly to apprehend Game and bring him to justice, advocates pointed out that earlier intervention could have saved Noon's life. Critics noted that domestic violence cases are often dismissed as private matters, leading to a lack of accountability for abusers. Advocacy groups called for mandatory training for law enforcement officers to better handle domestic violence reports and to recognize the patterns that often precede lethal violence. Noon's case was preventable, one advocate argued, if her cries for help had been taken more seriously, if there had been better resources for her to turn to, we might be telling a different story today. The media played a significant role in amplifying Noon's story, but not all coverage was equal. While some outlets focused on the sensational details of her murder, others used the platform to highlight the broader issues of domestic violence and systemic failure. Documentaries and in-depth reports delved into Noon's life, portraying her not just as a victim, but as a vibrant, ambitious woman whose potential was stolen by violence. These stories emphasized her humanity, reminding viewers of the real cost of domestic violence. Noon's story isn't just about her death, said a journalist who covered the trial. It's about the life she lived, the obstacles she faced, and the changes we need to make so that no one else suffers the way she did. Noon's murder prompted policymakers to consider legislative reforms aimed at better protecting victims of domestic violence. Proposals included stronger restraining order laws, making it easier for victims to obtain and enforce restraining orders against their abusers, increased funding for support services, allocating more resources to shelters, counseling programs, and legal aid for victims, public awareness campaigns, launching nationwide initiatives to challenge cultural norms that perpetuate domestic violence, and to encourage bystanders to intervene. These efforts, while promising, faced challenges in implementation. Advocates stressed the importance of sustained public pressure to ensure that these reforms were more than just temporary responses to a high-profile case. For Noon's friends and family, the focus remained on preserving her memory and using her story to drive change. They established the Chonlada Foundation, which provides scholarships for women pursuing education in social work and law, as well as funding for domestic violence prevention programs. At the foundation's launch event, Noon's sister spoke about the importance of continuing her fight. Noon didn't just want to survive. She wanted to thrive. She believed in a better future, and we owe it to her to build that future for others. Noon's murder was a devastating reminder of the dangers of domestic violence and the critical need for systemic change. Her story taught the following lessons: the importance of awareness, recognizing the signs of abuse, and intervening early can save lives. The role of community. Friends, neighbors, and colleagues play a crucial role in supporting victims and breaking the cycle of violence. The need for accountability. Abusers must be held accountable, and law enforcement must treat domestic violence cases with the seriousness they deserve. Though her life was cut short, Noon's legacy continues to inspire change. Her story has sparked conversations, mobilized communities, and brought attention to the silent epidemic of domestic violence. For her loved ones, the pain of her loss remains, but so does the hope that her death will lead to a safer, more compassionate world. Her light may be gone, her mother said at a memorial event, but her love and courage will guide us as we fight for others who are still in the darkness. Noon's death was a tragedy, but her story has become a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the power of collective action. Through her memory, she continues to inspire a movement for justice, safety, and change. The murder of Chonlada Noon Muthuong left an indelible mark on her family, friends, and community. As the trial concluded and her killer, Sirichai Game Rakthong, was sentenced to life in prison, the focus shifted to healing and ensuring that her story would lead to meaningful change. Noon's legacy became a powerful catalyst for reflection, advocacy, and collective action against domestic violence. The aftermath of Noon's death brought a wave of grief that united the people of Nonthaburi and beyond. Candlelight vigils were held in her honor, with hundreds gathering to pay their respects and share memories of the vibrant, kind-hearted woman who had been taken too soon. At one such vigil, a close friend spoke through tears about Noon's unwavering kindness and strength. She always put others first, even when she was struggling. Now it's our turn to put her first, to honor her life by making sure no one else has to go through what she did. Noon's story resonated deeply with many who saw reflections of their own lives in her struggles. Survivors of domestic violence shared their experiences, finding strength in her memory and using their voices to break the silence surrounding abuse. For many, Noon became a symbol of resilience and a call to action. Noon's death served as a wake-up call, highlighting the urgent need for greater awareness and resources to combat domestic violence. Advocacy groups, local leaders, and national organizations launched initiatives inspired by her story, focusing on education, prevention, and support. Public education campaigns, billboards, social media posts, and public service announcements emphasized the warning signs of abuse and encouraged bystanders to take action. These campaigns featured messages like "Break the silence" and "No more hiding," accompanied by information about helplines and shelters. Workshops and training. Community centers began hosting workshops for residents to learn how to recognize and intervene in abusive situations. Law enforcement agencies also implemented training programs to improve their response to domestic violence cases. School programs. Educational programs were introduced in schools to teach young people about healthy relationships, consent, and the importance of mutual respect. These initiatives aim to address the root causes of domestic violence by fostering empathy and understanding from an early age. In the months following Noon's death, her family established the Chonlada Foundation to continue her legacy. The foundation's mission was threefold: support for victims, providing funding for shelters, counseling services, and legal aid to help victims of domestic violence escape dangerous situations. Educational scholarships, offering scholarships to women pursuing studies in law, social work, and other fields related to advocacy and justice. Community outreach, organizing events and campaigns to raise awareness about domestic violence and promote systemic change. At the Foundation's launch event, Noon's sister spoke about the importance of turning pain into purpose. Noon believed in helping others, even when it was hard. Through this foundation, we're keeping her spirit alive and ensuring that her story makes a difference. Noon's story also prompted a broader societal reckoning with the cultural and systemic factors that enable domestic violence. Advocates highlighted the following key issues: cultural norms. In many communities, traditional gender roles and expectations pressure women to prioritize family harmony over personal safety. This stigma often discourages victims from seeking help. Economic dependence. Financial barriers prevent many victims from leaving abusive relationships, emphasizing the need for economic empowerment programs and resources. Legal gaps. Inconsistent enforcement of protective orders and limited access to legal aid leave victims vulnerable, calling for comprehensive legal reforms. These reflections fueled ongoing debates about how to create a society where domestic violence is not just addressed, but prevented. For Noon's family and friends, the journey of healing was long and complex. While the trial's conclusion brought a sense of closure, the void left by her absence was impossible to fill. Her mother, who had been a pillar of strength throughout the proceedings, spoke candidly about the duality of grief and hope. We've lost so much, but we've also gained a community that loved her and now fights for her. That gives us strength. Noon's friends channeled their grief into activism, volunteering with local shelters and sharing her story at public events. They described their work as both a tribute to her memory and a way to prevent similar tragedies. Noon's story reached far beyond Nonthaburi, resonating with audiences around the world. International organizations cited her case as an example of the universal nature of domestic violence and the urgent need for global action. Her legacy became part of a larger movement, inspiring collaborations across borders to share resources, strategies, and support systems. Her story also became a focal point for filmmakers, authors, and artists seeking to raise awareness through creative mediums. Documentaries and books chronicled her life, exploring the systemic failures that contributed to her death and the lessons her story offered. Noon's life and death taught profound lessons about resilience, love, and the fight against injustice. Among the most important takeaways were the importance of support. Systems, friends, family, and community members play a critical role in helping victims escape abusive relationships and rebuild their lives. The need for vigilance. Recognizing the signs of abuse and taking action can save lives. Silence and inaction often perpetuate cycles of violence. The power of advocacy. Grassroots efforts and systemic reforms must go hand in hand to address the root causes of domestic violence and create lasting change. Though her life was tragically cut short, Noon's legacy continues to inspire action and bring hope to those still struggling. Her story serves as a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable loss, there is the potential for resilience, growth, and transformation. Noon's light shines on, her mother said at a memorial service. Through the work we do in her name, we are building a world where no one has to suffer like she did. That's how we honor her. That's how we keep her with us. As her community moves forward, they carry with them the lessons and love that Noon shared during her life. Her memory fuels a movement for justice and compassion, proving that even in the darkest moments, there is always the possibility of light. It was a sunny morning in Indonesia, but what should have been an ordinary day turned into a scene straight out of a nightmare. A car, abandoned and reeking of mystery, caught the attention of locals in a quiet neighborhood. Little did they know, this seemingly ordinary vehicle held a gruesome secret that would send shockwaves across the nation. Inside the car lay the lifeless body of 19-year-old Addis Sarah Angelina Kuto, a bright and beautiful young woman whose life was cut short in the most horrifying way imaginable. What began as a baffling discovery quickly unraveled into one of the most shocking murder cases Indonesia has ever seen. The car, parked on the side of a road in Tangerang, gave off an unusual odor that nearby residents couldn't ignore. It was the kind of smell that sticks to your memory, foreboding and unmistakable. Driven by curiosity and concern, a group of locals approached the vehicle, peering inside to uncover the source of the stench. What they saw will haunt them forever. Addis's body was sprawled in the back seat, her face bruised, her lifeless eyes staring into nothingness. Around her were chilling signs of violence, evidence of a struggle that told a story more terrifying than any could have imagined. The once vibrant young woman was now the centerpiece of a horrific crime scene that left even seasoned investigators reeling. Artist Sara Angelina Couto wasn't just another face in the crowd. To those who knew her, she was a beacon of joy and ambition. Friends described her as the life of the party and a sister to everyone she met. She had dreams as big as her heart, aspirations that reached far beyond her hometown. At just 19, Addis was already carving out her place in the world. She was studying business with plans to one day run her own company. She wanted to inspire people, her best friend said. She was always thinking about the future, about making her family proud. But behind her radiant smile, Addis harbored a secret. She had been involved in a rocky relationship with a young man named Arif Wahyu. Friends had often expressed concerns about their tumultuous dynamic, but no one could have predicted the dark turn their relationship would take. As police arrived on the scene, the mystery only deepened. The car's owner, Arif, was nowhere to be found. Investigators immediately identified him as a person of interest. But what they uncovered during their search would shock even the most hardened detectives. CCTV footage revealed chilling images of Arif and another young woman, later identified as his new girlfriend, Nadia Sukma, driving the very car where Addis's body was found. Their movements on the night of the murder painted a sinister picture of premeditation and cruelty. According to the footage, Arif and Nadia had been spotted purchasing cleaning supplies, duct tape, and gasoline, items that investigators believe were intended to destroy evidence. Their cold, calculated behavior stood in stark contrast to the horror they had left behind. As the investigation continued, the horrifying details of Addis's final moments came to light. She had been lured into the car under false pretenses, believing she was meeting Arif to resolve their ongoing conflicts. Instead, she walked straight into a trap. Inside the vehicle, an argument escalated into violence. Addis fought valiantly, but the odds were stacked against her. Arif and Nadia, driven by jealousy and rage, overpowered her, leaving her battered and lifeless in the back seat. What drove two young people to commit such a heinous act? The motive, investigators revealed, was as old as time: jealousy and control. Arif, unwilling to let go of Addis, viewed her independence as a threat. Nadia, consumed by envy, saw Addis as an obstacle to her relationship with Arif. Together, they formed a toxic bond that ended in murder. The murder of Addis Sara Angelina Couto became a lightning rod for public outrage. Social media erupted with calls for justice, as hashtags like "A Justice for Dice" and the "Stop the Violence" began trending nationwide. Candlelight vigils were held across Indonesia, with thousands gathering to honor the young woman whose life had been stolen. For many, Addis's murder was not just a crime, it was a wake-up call. It exposed the darker side of relationships gone wrong, the dangers of unchecked anger and jealousy. and the vulnerability of young women in a world that often fails to protect them. As police closed in on Arif and Nadia, the pair seemed to believe they could escape justice, but their arrogance would be their downfall. With mounting evidence and public pressure, investigators were determined to bring them to justice and ensure that Addis's voice would not be silenced. The case was far from over, but one thing was clear: Addis's story would not be forgotten. It had already become a symbol of resilience and a call to action, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable horror, the truth will always find its way to the light. Addis Sarah Angelina Couto wasn't just a name on a police report. She was a dreamer, a doer, and a young woman who lit up every room she entered. Her murder wasn't just a crime. It was a tragedy that left a gaping hole in the hearts of those who knew and loved her. At just 19 years old, Addis had a whole life ahead of her. Born and raised in a close-knit community in Indonesia, she was the second of 3 siblings and the pride of her family. Her parents described her as a diligent, kind-hearted girl who always went the extra mile for her loved ones. She was our sunshine, her mother said tearfully. She made everything brighter. Addis had big dreams. She was studying business at a local university, with plans to one day open her own company. She often spoke of wanting to give back to her community, to create opportunities for others the way her parents had created opportunities for her. Her friends remember her as a go-getter who refused to let anything stand in her way. She had this magnetic energy, said her best friend Maya. When you were around her, you felt like anything was possible. She believed in herself, and she made you believe in yourself too. But Addis's drive wasn't the only thing people admired about her. She was also fiercely loyal, always ready to lend a helping hand or a listening ear. Whether it was organizing study groups for her classmates or staying up late to comfort a friend, Addis made it clear that she cared deeply about the people in her life. Behind her infectious smile and boundless optimism, Addis was hiding a darker reality. For 2 years, she had been in a tumultuous relationship with 21-year-old Arif Wahyu, a young man who initially seemed like Prince Charming, but quickly revealed a much darker side. When they first met, Arif swept Addis off her feet with his charm and confidence. He was attentive, always showing up with flowers or sweet messages, and he made her feel like the center of his world. But as time went on, the cracks began to show. Arif's confidence morphed into possessiveness, and his sweet gestures became overshadowed by his jealous outbursts. He wanted to control her, Maya explained. If she went out with friends or didn't reply to his texts right away, he'd get furious. At first, she thought it was because he loved her so much, but we could all see it was toxic. Addis tried to make things work, believing she could help Arif change. But as his behavior became more erratic, her friends and family grew increasingly concerned. Arguments became more frequent, and Addis began to pull away from the people who cared about her most. She was always so open with us, Maya said. But after a while, she started keeping things to herself. It was like she was slipping away. By the time Addis decided to end the relationship, it was already too late. Arif couldn't handle the idea of losing her, and his jealousy spiraled into rage. According to her friends, Adis had confided that she was afraid of what Arif might do if she broke things off completely. She told me, "He says he can't live without me," Maya recalled. I begged her to stay away from him, but she didn't want to believe he could hurt her. Adding fuel to the fire was the arrival of Arif's new girlfriend, Nadia Sukma, a 20-year-old who seemed eager to help him plot his revenge against Adis. Their relationship, far from being a fresh start, was built on a foundation of jealousy and toxicity. Together, Arif and Nadia became a volatile duo, with their shared resentment toward Adis driving them to unspeakable acts. In the days leading up to her murder, Adis was trying to move on with her life. She was focusing on her studies, spending time with her friends, and planning for her future. But the shadow of her relationship with Arif loomed large. Her friends later revealed that she had received multiple messages from him, begging her to meet and talk things out. Adis, always compassionate, agreed, hoping to find closure and put an end to the drama once and for all. She wanted to believe the best in people, Maya said. Even after everything he put her through, she thought she could help him see reason. That's just who she was. On the night of her death, Adis told her family she was going out to meet a friend. She promised to be back soon, flashing them her signature smile as she walked out the door. It was the last time they would see her alive. Adis's decision to meet with Arif would prove to be fatal. According to investigators, she got into his car, unaware that Nadia was waiting in the back seat. What started as a conversation quickly escalated into violence. Witnesses reported hearing raised voices and muffled screams as the car sped off into the night. Adis fought back with everything she had, but she was no match for the two attackers. Arif and Nadia overpowered her, their jealousy and rage boiling over into an act of pure brutality. The exact details of what happened in that car remain too gruesome to recount fully. But one thing is clear. Adis's final moments were filled with terror. The news of Adis's murder sent shockwaves through her community and beyond. Social media lit up with tributes to the young woman, whose life was stolen far too soon. Hashtags like Ahando, Justice for Adis, and Stop Youth Violence trended for days, as people from all walks of life came together to demand accountability for her killers. She had so much more to give, her professor said during a memorial service. Adis was going to change the world. It's up to us now to make sure her story inspires the change she wanted to see. For Adis's family, the grief was overwhelming. Her parents, who had worked tirelessly to provide her with opportunities, struggled to comprehend the senseless violence that took her away. Her younger brother, clutching a framed photo of her, summed up what so many were feeling. She didn't deserve this. She deserved everything good. Adis's tragic story serves as a chilling reminder of how toxic relationships can spiral out of control and how jealousy, when left unchecked, can turn deadly. It's a wake-up call to communities everywhere to recognize the warning signs and intervene before it's too late. As the investigation into her murder continues, one thing is certain. Adis Sarah Angelina Couteau's life was a beacon of light, and her death will not be in vain. Her story has already begun to inspire change, shining a spotlight on the dangers of possessive relationships and the urgent need to protect those at risk. Her friends and family vow to honor her memory, ensuring that the world never forgets the name Aris Sara Angelina Kuto, a bright star whose light will continue to shine even in the darkest of times. The murder of Aris Sara Angelina Kuto wasn't just a tragic loss. It was a crime so calculated, so horrifying, that it left investigators stunned. As the details began to emerge, a chilling picture of jealousy, betrayal, and violence came into focus, leaving no doubt about the monstrous acts committed inside that fateful car. It all started with a single phone call. A local in Tangerang, Indonesia, reported a suspicious, abandoned car emitting a foul odor. What investigators found inside was beyond their worst fears. Aris's lifeless body was sprawled in the back seat, showing clear signs of a violent attack. Her face bore bruises, her hands had defensive wounds, and there were marks around her neck suggesting strangulation. The vehicle itself told a story of chaos and struggle. Blood spatter on the upholstery, scratch marks on the interior, and signs of an attempt to clean the scene pointed to a crime that was both brutal and hastily covered up. Forensic teams immediately got to work, gathering evidence that would later prove vital in unraveling the mystery of Addis's murder. In a case filled with questions, the first answers came from a source that has become the silent witness in countless crimes: CCTV footage. Cameras from a nearby gas station captured images of Arif Wahyu and Nadia Sukma, the prime suspects, purchasing cleaning supplies and duct tape shortly before Addis's death. The footage revealed their calm demeanor, a stark contrast to the horrifying events that would follow. Another set of cameras near the abandoned car captured the same duo disposing of evidence and fleeing the scene. The footage was damning, providing investigators with a clear link between Arif, Nadia, and the murder. It was chilling to see how composed they were, one officer remarked. They showed no signs of panic, just cold, calculated actions. Using GPS data from Arif's phone and the car's navigation system, investigators pieced together the timeline of Addis's final moments. She had entered the car willingly, likely believing she was meeting Arif to resolve their lingering conflicts. However, the presence of Nadia in the back seat turned what should have been a conversation into a deadly ambush. According to the evidence, an argument quickly erupted inside the vehicle. Witnesses in the area reported hearing muffled screams and the sound of something striking the interior of the car. Forensic analysis later revealed that Addis had been strangled and beaten, with her injuries indicating a prolonged struggle. Despite her valiant efforts to fight back, the odds were against her. By the time Addis's body was discovered, Arif and Nadia had vanished. Their sudden disappearance only fueled suspicions, and a nationwide manhunt was launched to track them down. Investigators followed a trail of clues, including Arif's last known whereabouts and Nadia's recent social media posts, which hinted at their possible location. As the manhunt unfolded, shocking details about the couple's relationship began to surface. Witnesses came forward with accounts of their toxic dynamic, describing Nadia's jealousy of Addis and Arif's obsessive need to control her. Friends of the pair revealed that they had often spoken about Addis in derogatory terms, painting her as an obstacle to their happiness. It was clear they were obsessed with her. One friend said they couldn't let her go, even if it meant destroying her. After several days on the run, Arif and Nadia were apprehended in a small coastal town where they had been hiding in a relative's home. The arrest was swift and uneventful, with both suspects surrendering without resistance. But their calm demeanor during the arrest only added to the unsettling nature of the case. When questioned, Arif initially denied any involvement in Adis's death, claiming that they had argued but parted ways peacefully. Nadia, on the other hand, was less composed, breaking down during interrogation and implicating both herself and Arif in the murder. Her confession provided critical details about the crime, including their plan to lure Adis into the car and their subsequent attempts to cover their tracks. The physical evidence against Arif and Nadia was overwhelming. In addition to the CCTV footage, forensic analysis of the car revealed a treasure trove of damning clues. Blood spatter. Adis's blood was found on the car's interior, consistent with the injuries detailed in her autopsy. Fingerprints. Arif's and Nadia's fingerprints were found on the cleaning supplies and duct tape used during the crime. Personal belongings. Adis's phone and jewelry, which had been taken during the attack, were recovered from Nadia's bag. These findings painted a grim picture of two individuals who had meticulously planned and executed a heinous crime, only to be undone by their own arrogance and carelessness. While the physical evidence left no doubt about who committed the crime, the question of why lingered in the minds of investigators and the public. What could drive two young people to commit such a horrific act? The answer lay in the toxic cocktail of jealousy, control, and resentment that defined Arif and Nadia's relationship. Arif, unwilling to let go of Adis, saw her independence as a threat to his fragile ego. Nadia, consumed by jealousy, viewed Adis as a rival who needed to be eliminated. Together, they formed a dangerous alliance fueled by their shared hatred and insecurities. Psychologists brought in to analyze the case described their behavior as a classic example of coercive control turned deadly. Arif's obsessive need to dominate Adis, combined with Nadia's desire to prove her loyalty to him, created a volatile dynamic that exploded into violence. As the details of Adis's murder came to light, the community was left reeling. How could something so horrific happen in their midst? And how had two seemingly ordinary young people become capable of such cruelty? Vigils were held in Adis's honor, with friends, family, and strangers coming together to mourn her loss and demand justice. Social media was flooded with tributes, with many sharing photos of Adis smiling and full of life. She deserved so much more. One post read, "We won't stop until her killers are held accountable." The stage was set for what promised to be one of the most high-profile trials in Indonesia's recent history. With overwhelming evidence and public outrage fueling the case, prosecutors vowed to seek the maximum penalty for Arif and Nadia. For Adis's family, the trial would be an opportunity to confront the people who had taken their daughter away, and to ensure that her story would serve as a warning to others. "We want justice," her mother said, "not just for Adis, but for every young woman who has ever been afraid to speak up, who has ever felt trapped in a toxic relationship." As the investigation moved toward trial, one thing was clear. The murder of Adis Sarah Angelina Kutu was more than just a crime. It was a wake-up call. It exposed the dangers of toxic relationships. the devastating impact of unchecked jealousy, and the urgent need for communities to recognize and address the warning signs before it's too late. Addis's story was far from over. It had already begun to inspire change, serving as a rallying cry for justice and a reminder that even in the face of unspeakable tragedy, the truth has a way of coming to light. The trial of Arif Wahyu and Nadia Sukma wasn't just about determining guilt. It was about exposing the depth of their cruelty and ensuring justice for Adi Sara Angelina Kuto. The courtroom became a battleground where every chilling detail of the crime was laid bare, and the entire nation watched as the two perpetrators faced the consequences of their actions. From the moment the trial began, it captured the attention of the Indonesian public. Media outlets provided live updates, and social media buzzed with discussions about the case. People who had never met Adis felt connected to her story, her life, and her tragic death. Hashtags like Sa Justice for Adis and Punish the Monsters flooded timelines with citizens calling for the harshest penalties for the accused. Adis's parents and siblings sat stoically in the courtroom, clutching photographs of their beloved daughter and sister. "We're here for her mother said. "She deserves to have her voice heard." Arif and Nadia faced multiple charges, including premeditated murder for the deliberate planning and execution of Aris's death, evidence tampering for attempting to clean the crime scene and dispose of Aris's body, conspiracy for working together to lure Adis into a trap. The prosecution made it clear from the start, this was not a crime of passion. It was a calculated act driven by jealousy, control, and a disturbing lack of humanity. The prosecution meticulously presented their case, building a timeline of events that left no doubt about the couple's guilt. They used CCTV footage, clips showing Arif and Nadia purchasing cleaning supplies and duct tape, as well as their movements around the crime scene. Forensic evidence, blood samples, fingerprints, and items recovered from the car, all linking the crime directly to the accused. Witness testimonies, statements from friends, neighbors, and forensic experts painted a clear picture of the couple's toxic relationship and Adis's final moments. The most damning evidence, however, came from Nadia's own confession. In a taped interrogation, she described how she and Arif had planned the attack. "He told me we had to do it," she said, her voice trembling. "He said Adis would never leave us alone." Arif and Nadia's defense team faced an uphill battle. Their strategy focused on portraying the crime as impulsive rather than premeditated. They argued that the argument in the car had escalated unexpectedly and that the couple had panicked after Adis's death. Arif's lawyer painted him as a troubled young man who had been overwhelmed by his emotions. "He didn't plan to kill her," the lawyer claimed. "This was a tragic accident, not a calculated act." Nadia's defense, meanwhile, tried to frame her as a victim of Arif's manipulation. Her lawyer argued that she had been coerced into participating in the crime, describing her as a young woman blinded by love and fear. Throughout the trial, Arif and Nadia's demeanor became a focal point. Witnesses noted their lack of visible remorse, with Arif appearing stoic and emotionless, while Nadia alternated between tears and silence. For many, their behavior in the courtroom was as chilling as the crime itself. During his testimony, Arif showed no signs of regret. Instead, he appeared defiant, blaming Addis for the argument and claiming she had pushed him too far. His words drew audible gasps from the courtroom and tears from Addis's family. Nadia, while more emotional, also struggled to garner sympathy. Her shifting accounts of the crime and her attempts to minimize her role only added to the public's anger. "I didn't want to do it," she said during her testimony, "but I couldn't say no to him." The most heart-wrenching moments of the trial came from those who had loved Addis. Her best friend Maya took the stand to share the impact of her loss. "She was more than my friend," Maya said through tears. "She was my sister, my inspiration. They didn't just take her life. They took a part of all of us." Addis's mother also delivered a powerful statement addressing Arif and Nadia directly. "You stole our sunshine," she said, her voice breaking. "You took away a daughter, a sister, a friend, but you will never take her light. It will shine forever, even in the darkness you've created." After weeks of emotional testimony and overwhelming evidence, the jury reached their decision. Arif and Nadia were found guilty on all counts, including premeditated murder. The judge, in a scathing condemnation of their actions, described the crime as a monstrous betrayal of trust and humanity. Both were sentenced to life imprisonment with no possibility of parole for at least 25 years. The courtroom erupted in applause and tears as the verdict was read. For Addis's family, it was a moment of bittersweet relief. "It won't bring her back," her father said, "but it's the justice she deserved." The trial's conclusion sparked a wave of reflection across Indonesia. Addis's murder forced the nation to confront uncomfortable truths about jealousy, toxic relationships, and the warning signs of violence. Advocacy groups use the case to highlight the importance of early intervention and education, emphasizing the need to break the cycle of abuse before it escalates to tragedy. While the trial brought closure to the case, Addis's story continues to resonate far beyond the courtroom. Her family and friends have dedicated themselves to preserving her memory, launching the Addis Foundation to raise awareness about domestic violence and support young women in crisis. "She always wanted to make a difference," Maya said at the foundation's launch event. Now, even though she's gone, she's still changing lives. The trial of Arif and Nadia wasn't just about punishing two individuals. It was about sending a message. Addis's story serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked jealousy and the importance of recognizing the signs of toxic relationships. As her mother said during her closing remarks, "We couldn't save Addis, but we can save others. That's how we honor her. That's how we make sure her light never fades." The trial of Arif Wahyu and Nadia Sukma brought justice for Addis Sarah Angelina Kuto, but the ripples of her tragic death extended far beyond the courtroom. In its wake, Indonesia was left grappling with the societal and systemic issues that allowed such a horrifying crime to occur. Addis's story became a rallying cry for change, igniting discussions on toxic relationships, youth violence, and the urgent need for better protections for women. For Addis's family, the verdict brought a sense of justice but not closure. Life without her was a daily battle, filled with memories that were both comforting and painful. Her mother, in a heartfelt interview with a local news outlet, described the empty space Addis had left behind. "She was our sunshine," she said. "Her laughter used to fill this house. Now, it's so quiet." Her father channeled his grief into action, advocating for stronger laws to protect young women from violence. "If we don't learn from this, then we failed Addis," he said. "Her death must mean something." Addis's friends also struggled to come to terms with the loss. Maya, her best friend, spoke candidly about the lingering trauma of losing someone so close in such a horrific way. "Every day, I think about what she must have gone through," she said. "It's something I wouldn't wish on anyone. We have to make sure this doesn't happen again." In Tangerang, where Addis had lived and died, her murder became a catalyst for change. Local leaders organized town hall meetings to discuss how the community could better protect its young people. Topics ranged from recognizing the signs of abusive relationships to creating safe spaces for victims to seek help. Schools and universities introduced workshops on healthy relationships and emotional intelligence, hoping to equip students with the tools to navigate conflicts without resorting to violence. "We can't change what happened to Addis," said one community leader, "but we can change the way we support our young people moving forward." The community also held an annual vigil in Addis's memory, a somber but powerful event that brought people together to reflect on her life and the lessons her death had taught them. At the first vigil, her younger brother spoke to the crowd, urging them to honor her legacy by standing up against violence. "Addis wouldn't want us to be angry," he said. "She'd want us to fight for a better world." Addis's story resonated far beyond her community, sparking nationwide conversations about the societal factors that contribute to violence against women. Advocacy groups used the case to highlight the alarming prevalence of domestic violence and toxic relationships, emphasizing the importance of early intervention. Key issues that emerged included the role of jealousy and control. Experts pointed to the dangers of possessiveness in relationships, urging young people to recognize unhealthy dynamics and seek help when necessary. Youth violence. The involvement of two young perpetrators in such a brutal crime raised questions about the pressures and influences faced by Indonesia's youth, from social media to societal expectations. The stigma around seeking help. Many pointed out that victims like Addis often feel trapped, fearing judgment or retaliation if they speak out. Advocacy groups called for more accessible resources and public campaigns to encourage victims to seek help. In the months following the trial, Addis's family launched the Addis Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to preventing violence against women and supporting young people in crisis. The foundation's mission was to turn Addis's story into a force for good, ensuring that her death would not be in vain. The foundation focused on three main initiatives: education and awareness, hosting workshops and creating educational materials on recognizing and addressing toxic relationships, support services, funding counseling programs, emergency shelters, and legal aid for victims of violence, scholarships, providing financial assistance to young women pursuing education, particularly in fields related to social work and advocacy. At the Foundation's launch event, Adisi's mother spoke about the importance of continuing her daughter's legacy. "Adis, was a light in this world, she said. Through this foundation, we'll make sure that light never goes out. Social media played a pivotal role in amplifying Addis's story and mobilizing public support. Hashtags like Siege or Justice for Addis and Yeah, Stop the Violence trended for weeks, with people sharing tributes, calls to action, and resources for victims of abuse. Activists use platforms like Instagram and Twitter to raise awareness about the warning signs of abusive relationships and to challenge cultural norms that perpetuate gender-based violence. Addis's story isn't just about what happened to her, one post read. It's about how we can all do better to protect the people we love. Addis's murder served as a wake-up call, forcing society to confront uncomfortable truths about jealousy, control, and violence. Among the key lessons were recognizing the signs. Friends, family, and communities must learn to identify the warning signs of toxic relationships and intervene before it's too late. Empowering victims. Providing resources and support for those in abusive situations is crucial to breaking the cycle of violence. Challenging cultural norms. Addressing the societal pressures that normalize possessiveness and aggression is essential to creating a safer world. Addis's story reached audiences far beyond Indonesia, resonating with people around the world who saw echoes of her struggles in their own lives. International organizations cited her case as an example of the universal nature of violence against women and the urgent need for systemic change. Her legacy inspired collaborations between advocacy groups across borders, sharing resources and strategies to address the root causes of violence. Addis's story is a reminder that this is a global issue, said one activist. Her light shines on in every step we take to make the world safer for women. As her community and the nation continue to heal, Addis's family found solace in the knowledge that her story had sparked meaningful change. She always wanted to make a difference, her father said. Now, even though she's gone, she's still changing the world. The annual vigils in her honor became more than just a remembrance. They became a celebration of her life and a commitment to the future she dreamed of. As her younger brother put it, Addis may be gone, but her light is still here, guiding us towards something better. Addis's story is a testament to the strength of a community, united in the face of tragedy. Her life, though cut short, continues to inspire hope, action, and the determination to ensure that no one else has to endure the same fate. Her light will never fade. Addis Sarah Angelina Couto's life may have been cut short, but her legacy has become a beacon of hope and a rallying cry for change. In the wake of her tragic murder, her story has transcended the crime itself, inspiring individuals, communities, and even nations to take action against violence and ensure that her memory continues to make a difference. For Addis's family, the pain of losing her is a wound that will never fully heal. Yet, amidst their grief, they found a sense of purpose, ensuring that her death is not in vain. The Addis Foundation, established in her honor, has become a powerful force for advocacy and change. Through the foundation, Addis's parents and siblings work tirelessly to promote awareness about domestic violence and toxic relationships. They collaborate with schools, community organizations, and government agencies to provide education and resources that can save lives. Addis was always about helping others, her mother said. This is our way of keeping her spirit alive. The Foundation's scholarship program, which supports young women pursuing education and leadership roles, has already made a tangible impact. Recipients often describe how Addis's story motivates them to strive for a better future, not just for themselves, but for their communities. I want to make her proud, one recipient said. I want to carry her light forward. Addis's murder has forced Indonesian society to confront difficult truths about the prevalence of violence and the cultural norms that enable it. The case sparked a nationwide dialogue on issues such as the dangers of jealousy and possessiveness. Advocates emphasized the importance of recognizing red flags in relationships and addressing them early. The need for accessible resources. Many pointed out the barriers victims face when trying to leave abusive relationships, including fear, stigma, and lack of support. The role of communities. Neighbors, friends, and families were urged to play a more active role in identifying and intervening in cases of potential violence. The discussions extended beyond Indonesia's borders, with international organizations citing Addis's story as a call to action for global efforts to combat violence against women. Her case became a symbol of the urgent need for systemic change, inspiring campaigns and initiatives worldwide. One of the most significant outcomes of Addis's legacy has been the emphasis on empowering young people to build healthier relationships. Schools across Indonesia have introduced programs focused on emotional intelligence, conflict resolution, and recognizing the signs of toxic dynamics. These efforts aim to equip students with the tools they need to navigate relationships and avoid the pitfalls that led to Addis's tragic fate. Universities and workplaces have also joined the movement, offering workshops and resources for young adults. We want to create a culture where respect and empathy are the norm, said a representative from a university that partnered with the Addis Foundation. Addis's story reminds us of what's at stake. Addis's story has also galvanized communities to take a more active role in preventing violence. In Tangerang, her hometown, local leaders have implemented initiatives to strengthen community ties and promote vigilance. These include neighborhood watch programs. Residents are encouraged to look out for one another and report signs of trouble, fostering a sense of collective responsibility. Support networks. Community centers now offer counseling and resources for individuals experiencing relationship conflicts or abuse. Annual awareness campaigns. Events like candlelight vigils and public seminars serve as reminders of Addis's legacy and the importance of continued action. These programs are about more than just honoring Addis. One local leader explained. They're about making sure no one else has to go through what she did. The impact of Addis's story has extended far beyond Indonesia, resonating with audiences around the world. Advocacy groups in other countries have used her case as a starting point for conversations about violence, gender dynamics, and the importance of early intervention. In Southeast Asia, regional organizations have partnered with the Addis Foundation to share best practices and resources. International forums on violence prevention, now often includes sessions dedicated to Addis's legacy, highlighting how her story has inspired change on a global scale. It's incredible to see how one life can touch so many, said representative from a women's rights organization in the Philippines. Addis's story is a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there's a chance for light to shine through. Media coverage played a crucial role in amplifying Addis's story, turning her case from a local tragedy into a national and international movement. Documentaries, podcasts, and investigative articles have delved into her life, her dreams, and the systemic issues that led to her death. These stories have not only kept her memory alive, but also educated audiences about the importance of addressing violence in all its forms. The Addis Foundation has also leveraged storytelling as a tool for change. Through social media campaigns, they've shared stories of survivors, resources for victims, and messages of hope and resilience. We want people to see that change is possible, said a foundation spokesperson. Addis's story is heartbreaking, but it's also a call to action. For those who knew Addis, her legacy is about more than just preventing violence. It's about honoring the values she stood for. Her kindness, determination, and belief in a better future continue to inspire those who carry her memory forward. Her family takes solace in the knowledge that Addis's life, though tragically short, has made a lasting impact. She wanted to change the world, her father said, and in her own way, she has. As time passes, the pain of Addis's loss remains, but so does the determination to ensure that her story leads to lasting change. Her foundation, her community, and the movements inspired by her story are all testaments to the power of resilience and the human spirit. Addis may be gone, Maya said at a recent vigil, but she's still here with us, in every act of kindness, in every step toward justice, in every life her story saves, her light will never fade. Addis Sarah Angelina Couteau's story is one of heartbreak and hope, a reminder of the fragility of life and the strength of a community united in the face of tragedy. Through her legacy, she continues to inspire action, spark change, and shine a light on the path toward a safer, more compassionate world. Her name is more than a memory, it's a movement. And as her family, friends, and countless others work to carry her light forward, they ensure that her impact will be felt for generations to come. Addis's light will never go out. It was a sunny spring day in 1996 when 5-year-old Yukari Yokoyama vanished into thin air, leaving behind nothing but a heartbroken family and a nation desperate for answers. Little did anyone know, her disappearance would ignite one of Japan's most chilling mysteries. A story of systemic failure, eerie patterns, and a shadowy figure who may still be out there. The small town of Ojiya was known for its serenity, nestled in the scenic landscapes of Niigata Prefecture. It was a place where neighbors trusted one another, and children played freely, their laughter echoing through the streets. But all of that changed on that fateful day in May, when Yukari, with her bright smile and pigtails bouncing, disappeared without a trace. That morning, Yukari had begged her parents to let her walk to her friend's house just a few streets away. It was a trip she had made many times before, and her parents reluctantly agreed, believing she was safe in their tight-knit community. But when lunchtime came and Yukari didn't return, Her mother's heart sank. I had this feeling, this horrible, sinking feeling, that something was wrong, her mother later said, tears streaming down her face. I ran to her friend's house, but she wasn't there. That's when the nightmare began. Within hours, the entire town was mobilized. Police, volunteers, and neighbors scoured the area, calling out Yukari's name and checking every alley, park, and field. Posters bearing her cherubic face were plastered on walls, and local news channels broadcasted her disappearance, urging anyone with information to come forward. But the hours turned into days, and the days into weeks. There were no witnesses, no leads, and no clues. It was as if Yukari had simply vanished into thin air. The only thing left behind was a mother's haunting account of the last time she saw her daughter, waving goodbye with her tiny hand. Ojia was no longer the safe haven it had once been. Parents kept their children indoors, locking their doors and looking over their shoulders. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some speculated that Yukari had been kidnapped by a stranger, while others whispered about a more sinister possibility. Could someone in their own community have taken her? Then came the eerie discoveries. Over the next few years, several other children went missing under similarly baffling circumstances. Each case bore chilling similarities: young victims, quiet towns, and no witnesses. It wasn't long before people began connecting the dots, wondering if these disappearances were the work of a serial predator. Yukari's case wasn't the first or the last. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a string of similar disappearances across Japan. There was 7-year-old Mei Sato, who vanished near a pachinko parlor in 1988, and 9-year-old Hiroki Tanaka, whose bicycle was found abandoned near a riverside in 1992. Both cases, like Yukari's, were marked by an eerie absence of evidence. But what truly sent shivers down the nation's spine was the growing realization that these children's disappearances seemed to form a sinister pattern. Many had been last seen near pachinko parlors or convenience stores, everyday places that now felt tainted by danger. The media dubbed the unidentified perpetrator the Phantom Predator. His or her ability to abduct children without leaving a single clue left both investigators and the public baffled. Was this person a master manipulator, blending seamlessly into the background? Or was the truth even darker, involving a network of accomplices and cover-ups? For Yukari's family, every day since her disappearance has been a waking nightmare. Her parents have kept her room exactly as it was, her toys neatly arranged, and her favorite stuffed rabbit perched on the bed. "We can't bear to move anything," her father said in a rare interview. "It's like she's still here, waiting to come home." Every lead, no matter how small, has been a glimmer of hope for them, only to be dashed by disappointment. "We've had people call, claiming they saw her in another town, another prefecture," her mother shared. "But it's never her. It's never her." The Yokoyamas aren't alone in their grief. The families of other missing children have formed a tight-knit support group, bound by their shared pain and their relentless quest for answers. Together, they've become vocal advocates for better policing, demanding accountability and action from a system they feel has failed them. Yukari's case, along with the others, has cast a harsh spotlight on Japan's criminal justice system. Critics point to outdated investigative techniques, an over-reliance on coerced confessions, and a lack of interagency cooperation as key reasons why so many of these cases remain unsolved. In the case of Yukari, local police were accused of mishandling crucial early leads, wasting valuable time that could have been used to track down the perpetrator. Witnesses who reported seeing a suspicious van near the area were allegedly dismissed, their accounts buried in the chaos of the initial investigation. "It's a broken system," said journalist Koshi Shimizu, who has spent years investigating these cases. "The focus isn't on finding the truth, it's on closing cases quickly, even if it means leaving questions unanswered." Decades later, Yukari's disappearance remains an open wound, not just for her family, but for the entire nation. Who took her, and why? Could her case be linked to the other missing children? And perhaps the most chilling question of all, is the phantom predator still out there? Despite advances in forensic technology and renewed interest in cold cases, Yukari's fate remains a mystery. For her parents, every phone call, every knock on the door, is a cruel reminder of what they've lost and what they may never know. "We just want closure," her father said, his voice breaking. "We just want to bring her home." Yukari's story is more than just a tragedy. It's a call to action. Her disappearance has sparked debates about the need for systemic reform, better policing, and greater protections for vulnerable children. Advocacy groups have used her case to push for change, demanding that Japan's government prioritize solving these heartbreaking mysteries. For the Yokoyamas, the fight isn't over. They've vowed to keep searching, to keep hoping, and to keep telling Yukari's story until the day they finally get the answers they've been waiting for. As her mother tearfully said, "She's not just our daughter. She's everyone's daughter, and she deserves to be found." As the disappearance of Yukari Yokoyama gripped the nation, a chilling realization began to take hold. Her case wasn't unique. Across Japan, similar stories of missing children, eerily alike in their circumstances, emerged from the shadows. The patterns were unmistakable, and the implications were terrifying. Could Yukari's case be the work of a serial predator, silently hunting for decades? Long before Yukari vanished, there were whispers of other cases that bore striking resemblances. One of the earliest involved 7-year-old Mei Sato, who disappeared in 1988 near a pachinko parlor in a small town in Hokkaido. Mei had been playing with friends just outside the bustling establishment when she ran off to fetch a toy from home. She never returned. Witnesses claimed they saw a man lingering nearby in a white van, but police dismissed the sightings as inconclusive. May's case went cold, her family left with nothing but memories and a growing sense of frustration with the system that failed them. Then came Haruki Tanaka, a cheerful 9-year-old who vanished in 1992 while riding his bicycle near a riverside park in Nagano. His bike was discovered a day later, neatly propped against a tree, but there was no sign of Hiroki. Local police launched an extensive search but found no leads. The case was quietly shelved, and Hiroki's parents were left to grieve in silence. By the time Yukari went missing in 1996, investigators and journalists began to notice a disturbing pattern. Location similarities. Many of the disappearances occurred near pachinko parlors, riversides, or quiet residential neighborhoods. Age range: The victims were primarily children between the ages of 5 and 10, often described as outgoing and trusting. No evidence. In almost every case, there were no witnesses, no physical evidence, and no clear suspects. The similarities were impossible to ignore. Were these random acts of violence or the work of a single, calculating predator? The media dubbed the potential culprit the phantom predator, a shadowy figure who seemed to strike without leaving a trace. If the phantom predator was indeed responsible for these cases, their ability to evade detection was as chilling as the crimes themselves. Experts speculated that the predator's methods involved meticulous planning and an uncanny ability to blend into the environment. Theories included luring tactics, using toys, snacks, or even a friendly demeanor to gain the trust of unsuspecting children. Mobility. The use of vehicles like vans allowed for quick escapes and made tracking more difficult. Knowledge of local areas. Familiarity with secluded spots and quiet routes ensured that the predator could operate unnoticed. It's as if they knew exactly where to strike and how to disappear, said investigative journalist Koshi Shimizu, who has spent decades tracking these cases. This wasn't someone acting on impulse. This was someone who planned every detail. For the families of the missing children, the similarities brought both hope and despair. Hope that their cases might finally be connected, leading to answers. Despair at the realization that their children could have fallen victim to a serial predator. The Sato family, still mourning the loss of May, shared their frustration in a rare interview. "We always felt like we were fighting alone," her mother said. "The police would give us vague updates, but nothing ever happened. Now, hearing about these other cases, we wonder, could May have been saved if they had taken her disappearance seriously?" Similar sentiments were echoed by Hiroki Tanaka's parents, who revealed that they were never informed about other missing children cases in their area. "We had to find out through the news," Hiroki's father said bitterly. "How can you connect the dots if no one tells you there are dots to connect?" The trail of missing children cases exposed glaring flaws in Japan's criminal justice system. Among the most troubling issues were lack of coordination. Local police departments often operated in silos, failing to share information that could have linked cases. Dismissal of witness accounts. Many eyewitnesses who came forward were either ignored or discredited, leaving potential leads unexplored. Outdated techniques. In the 1980s and 1990s, forensic technology in Japan lagged behind global standards, making it difficult to collect and analyze evidence effectively. Journalist Takoshi Shimizu, who became a vocal critic of these systemic issues, described the handling of these cases as a tragic combination of incompetence and indifference. His investigative articles, published in major newspapers, sparked public outrage and calls for reform. One of the most haunting cases tied to the phantom predator was that of 6-year-old Akiko Yamamoto, who disappeared in 1994 from a bustling shopping district in Osaka. Unlike the other cases, Akiko's abduction had a key witness, her older brother, Daisuke, who was just 10 years old at the time. According to Daisuke, a man approached them while their parents were shopping, offering Akiko a balloon When she hesitated, he promised to show her more balloons in his car parked nearby. Before Daisuke could react, the man grabbed Akiko and fled. I ran after them, Daisuke said, his voice breaking during a televised interview years later. But he was too fast. I couldn't save her. Despite Daisuke's detailed description of the suspect, including his height, build, and clothing, police failed to identify the man. Akiko's case remains unsolved. Her family, haunted by both her loss and the knowledge that her abductor slipped through their fingers. As more cases emerged, the media played a pivotal role in connecting the dots and keeping public attention focused on the missing children. Documentaries, investigative reports, and true crime specials explore the possibility of a serial predator, analyzing the patterns and critiquing the system that allowed these cases to go unsolved. However, not all coverage was helpful. Sensationalist headlines and speculative theories often overshadow the facts, causing unnecessary pain for the victims' families. Every time a new article comes out, we relive the nightmare, said Yukari's mother. We just want the truth, not rumors or guesses. The string of disappearances sparked a movement among the families of the missing children. They banded together, forming a support group that became both a source of solace and a platform for advocacy. Their goals were clear: push for better policing, demand reforms to ensure that investigations are thorough and coordinated, raise public awareness, keep the stories of the missing children alive to prevent their cases from being forgotten, support each other, provide emotional and practical support to families, navigating the painful and often isolating experience of losing a child. At one of their gatherings, Yukari's father spoke about the importance of unity. We are stronger together, he said. Our children deserve justice, and we won't stop until we get it. By the late 1990s, the phantom predator had become a national obsession, a symbol of both fear and failure. Parents kept their children closer, communities became more vigilant, and authorities faced mounting pressure to solve the mystery. But even as public awareness grew, the trail seemed to grow colder. The phantom predator, if they existed, appeared to vanish into the shadows once again, leaving behind a legacy of pain, unanswered questions, and a haunting sense of unfinished business. While police efforts stagnated, leaving families in agony and the public demanding answers, one man refused to let the story of the missing children fade into obscurity. Investigative journalist Koshi Shimizu took it upon himself to uncover the truth, peeling back layers of negligence, secrecy, and systemic failure that plagued Japan's justice system. Koshi Shimizu was no stranger to uncovering uncomfortable truths. Known for his fearless reporting on government corruption and societal issues, he had earned a reputation as a journalist willing to go where others wouldn't. When he first heard about the disappearance of Yukari Yokoyama, he was struck by the eerie similarities to earlier cases. What stood out to me was the silence, Shimizu said in an interview. The media wasn't connecting the dots. The police weren't sharing information, and families were left to grieve in isolation. It felt like no one wanted to dig deeper. Shimizu began his investigation with a simple question. Could Yukari's disappearance be part of a larger pattern? The more he dug, the more disturbing the answers became. Shimizu's first breakthrough, came when he compiled a list of unsolved cases involving missing children over the past 2 decades. The similarities were chilling. Geographical clustering. Many cases occurred in quiet towns or suburban areas, often near pachinko parlors, riversides, or convenience stores. No evidence left behind. In almost every instance, the perpetrator managed to avoid leaving behind physical evidence, confounding investigators. Witness patterns. When witnesses were present, they often described a man driving a van or car. Though details were inconsistent, Shimizu meticulously pieced together a timeline, charting the locations and circumstances of each disappearance. His work revealed a potential serial predator whose movements were as calculated as they were sinister. It wasn't just about the victims, he explained. It was about the predator's ability to move unseen, to exploit the gaps in our systems. One of Shimizu's most explosive revelations was the role of police negligence in prolonging the mystery. Through interviews with retired officers and leaked internal reports, he uncovered a pattern of mishandled investigations, ignored leads. In Yukari's case, a witness reported seeing a suspicious van near her home, but police failed to follow up on the tip until weeks later. Lack of coordination. Local police departments often operated independently, refusing to share information that could have linked cases. Pressure to close cases. In several instances, police coerced confessions from suspects who were later proven innocent, wasting valuable time and resources. These weren't just mistakes, Shimizu said. They were systemic failures that allowed the predator to continue. His reporting sparked outrage, with families and advocacy groups demanding accountability. Public trust in the police plummeted, and calls for reform grew louder. Shimizu's relentless work also uncovered new leads that reignited hope for justice. One of the most significant breakthroughs came from a tip he received about the disappearance of Akiko Yamamoto, the 6-year-old taken from a shopping district in Osaka. A former security guard contacted Shimizu after reading one of his articles, claiming he had seen a man matching the suspect's description frequenting the area around the time of Akiko's abduction. He was always lingering near the toy section, the guard said. At the time, it didn't seem suspicious, but now it makes my skin crawl. Shimizu tracked down other witnesses who provided similar accounts, creating a composite profile of the possible perpetrator. While the police had dismissed these accounts years earlier, Shimizu's investigation brought them back to light, forcing authorities to revisit the case. As Shimizu's work gained attention, he became a thorn in the side of Japan's criminal justice system. Police officials accused him of sensationalism, while government agencies attempted to discredit his findings. But Shimizu refused to back down. The truth doesn't care about comfort, he said. These families deserve answers, and I won't stop until they get them. His persistence led to the creation of a task force dedicated to revisiting cold cases, a move that was both celebrated and criticized. While some hailed it as a step forward, others questioned whether the same flawed system could deliver justice. One of Shimizu's most significant contributions was giving the families of the missing children a platform to share their stories. Through interviews and public forums, He helped amplify their voices, turning personal grief into collective action. Yukari's mother, speaking at a press conference organized by Shimizu, described the pain of being ignored by authorities. For years, we felt invisible, she said, but thanks to people like Mr. Shimizu, we finally feel seen. The families formed a coalition to advocate for systemic reform, pushing for better investigative practices and greater accountability. Their efforts, combined with Shimizu's reporting, created a groundswell of support that forced the government to take action. While Shimizu's work brought progress, it also took a heavy toll on him personally. In interviews, he spoke candidly about the emotional weight of investigating such harrowing cases. "You carry these stories with you," he said. "You see the faces of the children in your dreams, and you hear the cries of their families. It's something you never forget." Despite the toll, Shimizu remained committed to his mission, driven by a sense of duty to the victims and their loved ones. "They don't get to walk away from this," he said, "so why should I?" Shimizu's reporting didn't just uncover new leads, it changed the way Japan approached missing children cases. Public pressure led to increased transparency. Police departments began sharing information across jurisdictions, creating a centralized database for missing persons. Improved forensic techniques, advances in DNA testing and evidence collection became standard practice, helping to solve cold cases. Legislative reforms. Laws were introduced to hold police accountable for negligence and to provide greater support for families of missing persons. For Shimizu, these changes were a testament to the power of persistence and the importance of holding systems accountable. "Change doesn't happen overnight," he said, "but every step forward is a step worth taking." Koshi Shimizu's work remains a beacon of hope for the families of the missing children and an example of the critical role journalism plays in uncovering the truth. While many questions about the phantom predator remain unanswered, his investigation has ensured that these stories will not be forgotten. As he once said, "These children deserve more than just justice. They deserve to be remembered, and their families deserve to know that their pain mattered." As the investigation into Japan's missing children unfolded, it became painfully clear that the real villain wasn't just the phantom predator. It was a broken system that allowed the predator to thrive. From neglected leads to outdated investigative methods, the systemic failures that plagued these cases became a story of their own, one that demanded answers and accountability. The disappearances of children like Yukari Yokoyama, Meisato, and Hiroki Tanaka exposed glaring weaknesses in Japan's criminal justice system. The police, often viewed as stalwart protectors of the public, struggled to keep up with the complexities of these cases. Key issues included fragmented investigations. Each case was handled by local police departments with little to no coordination across jurisdictions. As a result, patterns were missed and crucial connections between cases went unnoticed. Dismissal of witness accounts. Witnesses who reported suspicious activity, such as the van seen near Yukari's home, were often ignored or dismissed due to lack of corroborating evidence. This led to valuable leads going cold. In their desperation to close cases, police often resorted to coercing confessions from suspects, many of whom were later proven innocent. This not only delayed justice, but also allowed the real predator to remain at large. These failures painted a grim picture of a system more focused on appearances than outcomes, a system ill-equipped to handle the evolving nature of crime. One of the most significant failings was the misuse or outright neglect of forensic technology. By the 1990s, DNA testing was becoming a critical tool in solving crimes worldwide. Yet, in Japan, outdated methods and a lack of investment in modern technology left investigators struggling to analyze evidence effectively. In the case of Akiko Yamamoto, for instance, a piece of clothing believed to have been worn by her abductor was recovered. Despite its potential to yield DNA evidence, the item was mishandled and stored improperly, rendering it useless for testing. By the time forensic advancements could have been applied, the evidence had degraded beyond repair. This wasn't just negligence. It was a betrayal of the victims and their families, said journalist Koshi Shimizu. The tools to solve these cases existed, but the system refused to use them. The pressure to solve high-profile cases led to a disturbing trend: the reliance on coerced confessions. In several instances, individuals were detained and interrogated for hours, sometimes days, until they confessed to crimes they didn't commit. One such case involved Tetsuo Higa, a factory worker who was accused of abducting Hiroki Tanaka. Despite a lack of physical evidence linking him to the crime, Higa confessed after enduring 36 hours of continuous interrogation. Years later, DNA evidence proved his innocence. But by then, the real predator had vanished without a trace. These tactics didn't just destroy innocent lives, Shimizu explained. They gave the true criminal more time to act. For the families of the missing children, the systemic failures added another layer of pain to their already unbearable grief. Time and again, they were promised progress, only to be met with silence and excuses. Yukari's father recalled the frustration of dealing with unresponsive authorities. "We would call for updates, and they tell us to be patient," he said. "How do you stay patient when your child is missing? When every second feels like it could mean the difference between life and death?" The families often took matters into their own hands, organizing searches, distributing flyers, and even hiring private investigators. But their efforts were limited by resources and access, leaving them to rely on a system that seemed determined to let them down. Part of the problem lay in the rigid bureaucracy that governed Japan's criminal justice system. Decisions were often bogged down by red tape, with investigations requiring approval from multiple layers of hierarchy before proceeding. This created delays that proved fatal in time-sensitive cases. A former detective, speaking anonymously, described the frustration of working within such a system. "We knew what needed to be done," he said, "but our hands were tied by protocol. By the time we got permission to act, it was often too late." As journalist Koshi Shimizu began exposing these failures through his reporting, public outrage reached a boiling point. Vigils for the missing children turned into protests, with citizens demanding accountability from law enforcement and government officials. Slogans like "Justice delayed is justice denied" and "Our children deserve better" echoed through the streets. Social media amplified the movement, with hashtags like "Bao fix the system" and "Maushan's find our children" trending nationwide. Stories of police negligence and bureaucratic incompetence went viral, putting immense pressure on authorities to take action. The public outcry eventually forced the government to address the systemic issues that had allowed these cases to remain unsolved. Among the reforms introduced were centralized databases. A national database for missing persons and criminal cases was established, allowing police departments to share information and identify patterns more effectively. Improved training. Law enforcement officers received specialized training in forensic technology, victim support, and investigative techniques. Independent oversight. An independent body was created to review police conduct and ensure accountability in cases of negligence or misconduct. While these changes were welcomed, critics argued that they came too late for families like the Yokoyamas, who had already suffered irreparable losses. Despite the reforms, the phantom predator, if indeed one person was responsible, remained at large. The trail had gone cold, and new leads were scarce. For families and advocates, this was the most bitter pill to swallow, knowing that the system's failures had allowed a potential serial predator to evade justice. "We'll never stop looking," said Yukari's mother. "But it's hard to believe in a system that let us down so completely." Amid the darkness, there were small victories. Advances in forensic technology have led to breakthroughs in other cold cases, offering hope that Yukari's case and others like it might one day be solved. Advocacy groups continue to fight for the families, keeping their stories alive and pushing for further reforms. For journalist Koshi Shimizu, the fight isn't over. "These cases remind us of the cost of inaction," he said, "but they also show us the power of persistence. As long as we keep searching, there's hope." The story of Japan's missing children isn't just about the victims and their families. It's about a system forced to confront its own failings. While progress has been made, the scars left by decades of negligence and injustice remain. For the families, the fight for answers continues, driven by love, determination, and the belief that their children's stories still matter. In the wake of decades of unresolved disappearances, the demand for justice for Japan's missing children became a rallying cry for families, activists, and an outraged public. Their stories, once buried in the shadows of systemic failure, began to spark a movement that aimed to reshape Japan's approach to criminal justice and child safety. For years, the families of victims like Yukari Yokoyama, Mei Sato, and Hiroki Tanaka felt like they were shouting into the void. Their cries for justice were met with silence, their pain dismissed as another cold case. But thanks to the relentless efforts of journalist Koshi Shimizu and a growing network of activists, their voices were finally being heard. "We're not just statistics," Yukari's father said during a public rally. "We're families, we're parents, brothers, and sisters, and we deserve answers." The rally, held in Tokyo's Shinjuku district, drew thousands of supporters carrying signs with messages like "Find our children" and "No more lost lives." Families shared their stories, turning their personal grief into a collective call for action. The energy was palpable, a mixture of sorrow, anger, and determination to ensure that no other family would endure the same heartbreak. The public outrage ignited by these cases forced Japan's government to confront its systemic failings. advocacy groups spearheaded a campaign for sweeping reforms focusing on improved child safety measures. Schools and community centers began implementing programs to teach children how to recognize and avoid dangerous situations. Public awareness campaigns emphasized the importance of vigilance and reporting suspicious activity. Legislative changes. New laws were introduced to improve the handling of missing person cases, including mandatory reporting timelines and interagency coordination. Stricter penalties were imposed for negligence and misconduct within law enforcement. Support for families. A dedicated task force was created to provide families with resources such as counseling, financial assistance, and regular updates on their cases. The fight for justice wasn't confined to the families directly affected. Across Japan, citizens joined the cause, channeling their frustration into action. Volunteer groups formed to distribute flyers, organize search efforts, and advocate for policy changes. Social media became a powerful tool, with hashtags like Nos Justice for Yukari and Protect Our Children trending nationwide. One group, calling themselves the Watchers, took a proactive approach by monitoring high-risk areas such as pachinko parlors and riversides. Armed with cameras and notepads, they became the eyes and ears of their communities, determined to prevent future tragedies. "These aren't just the police's cases anymore," said one volunteer. "They're everyone's responsibility." The pressure from families and activists led to tangible changes within Japan's criminal justice system. Among the most significant were centralized databases. A national missing persons database was launched, allowing police departments to share information and identify patterns in real time. Enhanced forensic capabilities. Investments in DNA testing and digital forensics ensured that evidence could be analyzed more effectively, even in older cases. Independent oversight committees. These bodies were tasked with reviewing unsolved cases and investigating allegations of police misconduct, ensuring greater accountability. While these reforms represented progress, critics argued that they were long overdue. For the families, the changes were bittersweet. A step forward, but one that came at the cost of their children's lives. Despite the reforms, trust in the justice system remained fragile. For many families, the scars of years of neglect and incompetence were too deep to heal. "It's hard to believe in a system that failed us so completely," said Hiroki Tanaka's mother. "Even with these changes, there's no guarantee they'll find him or the others." This sentiment was echoed by advocates who warned against complacency. "Reform is only the beginning," said activist Naomi Ishida. "Real change requires constant vigilance and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths." Out of tragedy emerged a new generation of advocates, many of whom were inspired by the courage of the families who refused to give up. Organizations like the Yokoyama Foundation now work tirelessly to support victims' families and prevent future disappearances. The Foundation's initiatives include public education campaigns, teaching communities how to recognize and report the signs of child abduction, victim support services, providing counseling and legal assistance to families navigating the aftermath of a loved one's disappearance, policy advocacy, lobbying for continued reforms and increased funding for investigative resources. "Our mission is simple," said the Foundation's director. "We want to ensure that no family ever feels as powerless as Yukari's did." The string of disappearances also prompted a broader cultural reckoning in Japan. Parents became more cautious, communities more vigilant, and society as a whole more aware of the vulnerabilities children face. Schools incorporated safety training into their curriculums, and public spaces installed additional security measures to deter potential predators. "We've learned a hard lesson," said one local official. "But if we can protect even one child from harm, then we've honored the lives we've lost." Despite the progress, one haunting truth remains. The phantom predator is still out there. For the families, this is the most bitter pill to swallow. Their children's cases are no longer forgotten, but justice remains elusive. Yukari's mother, speaking at a memorial event, captured the heartbreak and hope that defined their journey. "Every day, we wake up wondering if today will be the day we get answers. And every night, we go to bed wondering if we'll ever know the truth. But we won't stop fighting. Not for Yukari, not for the others. They deserve justice, and we won't rest until they get it." The fight for justice is far from over. While the reforms have brought new hope, the families of Japan's missing children know that their work is just beginning. Their stories serve as a powerful reminder of the cost of inaction and the strength of resilience. As journalist Koshi Shimizu put it, "These families have shown us what it means to fight for what's right, even when the odds are against you. Their courage is a lesson for us all." Decades after the disappearance of Yukari Yokoyama and countless other children, their stories continue to resonate, not just as tragic reminders of a broken system, but as a rallying cry for change. Though justice remains elusive, the impact of their cases has sparked a movement that refuses to let their voices be silenced. For the families of Japan's missing children, the fight for answers is a lifelong mission. Yukari's parents, now older and visibly weary, still hold on to hope that one day they will know what happened to their daughter. Her mother, clutching a framed photo of Yukari during a recent vigil, spoke with quiet determination. "We owe it to her to keep going," she said. "Even if we never find her, we must make sure no other family goes through this pain." Families like the Yokoyamas have transformed their grief into action, becoming powerful advocates for reform. They've lobbied lawmakers, organized events, and partnered with organizations to push for policies that prioritize child safety. Their courage and persistence have inspired others, creating a community united by shared loss and an unshakable commitment to justice. Yukari's story, along with those of the other missing children, has become a symbol of resilience and change. Her name is invoked in schools, where children are taught about personal safety and the importance of vigilance. Communities hold annual events in her memory, ensuring that her light continues to shine. The Yokoyama Foundation, established in her honor, has grown into a national force for good. Its programs, from public education campaigns to victim support services, have touched thousands of lives. The Foundation's director recently reflected on its mission. "We can't change the past, but we can shape the future. That's what Yukari's legacy is about." Despite the progress, one chilling fact remains. The phantom predator, if they exist, has never been caught. The unresolved nature of the case continues to haunt families and investigators alike. Advances in forensic technology have led to breakthroughs in other cold cases, but Yukari's disappearance and others like it remain unsolved. Every lead we've chased has ended in frustration, admitted a retired detective who once worked on Yukari's case. It's like chasing a ghost. For journalist Koshi Shimizu, the lack of closure is a painful reminder of the system's failings. The predator might still be out there, he said. But what's even scarier is the thought that we may never know the truth. That's why we can't stop fighting. While Yukari's case remains a mystery, its impact on Japanese society is undeniable. The reforms sparked by her story and others have transformed the way missing persons cases are handled. Among the lasting changes are mandatory reporting. Authorities are now required to report missing children cases within 24 hours and mobilize resources immediately. Community watch programs. Neighborhoods across Japan have implemented watch programs to monitor public spaces and report suspicious activity. Enhanced forensic capabilities. Investments in DNA testing and digital forensics have become standard practice, ensuring that evidence is preserved and analyzed effectively. These changes, though long overdue, have saved lives and prevented further tragedies. For many, they represent a glimmer of hope in an otherwise dark chapter. The power of storytelling has been instrumental in keeping these cases alive. Documentaries, books, and true crime series have delved into the disappearances, shedding light on the systemic failures and the resilience of the families. These stories have not only educated the public, but also inspired action, turning individual tragedies into a collective movement. Shimizu's investigative work remains a cornerstone of this effort. Through his articles, interviews, and public appearances, he continues to push for answers and hold those in power accountable. As long as these stories are told, he said, the children will never be forgotten. Yukari's case, along with the others, has forced Japan to reflect on its values, priorities, and responsibilities. It has challenged the public to confront uncomfortable truths about trust, safety, and the cost of inaction. While progress has been made, the journey is far from over. Parents are now more vigilant, schools more proactive, and communities more united. But the shadow of the phantom predator serves as a reminder that the fight for justice is ongoing. For the families, advocates, and investigators who have dedicated their lives to this cause, the hope is that future generations will learn from their struggles. They envision a society where every child is safe, where no family is left to grieve in silence, and where justice is swift and fair. We owe it to our children, said Yukari's father at a recent memorial. Not just the ones we've lost, but the ones still here. They deserve a world where this never happens again. As the years pass, the search for Yukari and the other missing children remains both a tragedy and a testament to human resilience. Their stories have inspired change, but they also serve as a reminder of the work that still needs to be done. We may never find all the answers, Shimizu said, but what we can find is purpose. We can make sure their stories lead to something greater, something that protects the innocent and holds the guilty accountable. In the end, Yukari Yokoyama's legacy is one of hope, courage, and a refusal to give up. Her story, and those of the other missing children, continues to inspire a nation to be better, to fight harder, love deeper, and protect its most vulnerable. Her mother's final words at the latest vigil encapsulate the enduring spirit of this fight. We will never stop looking, we will never stop hoping, and we will never stop fighting for the justice our children deserve. The story of Yukari, the missing children, and the fight for justice may be unfinished, but one thing is certain: their light will never fade.